Welcome to Trauma, Psychedelics, and Buddhism with Karen Sprinkle, certified psychedelic guide, trauma therapist, and author of The Thriving Self. Drawing from over 30 years of experience in trauma therapy, embodied Buddhist practice, and immersive Eastern living, Karen explores the many paths to healing through conversation with Dharma teachers, scientists, and mental health professionals. Listen in and discover new ways of thinking about what it means to truly heal and to thrive.
Welcome, everyone, to Trauma, Psychedelics, and Buddhism. Today, I am thrilled to be with a new friend who I just recently met in Bangkok. We have so much in common, and this individual is Sudi Narasimhan. He's going to
Perfect.
correct me. Okay, great. And Sudi is extraordinarily special in that he is the CEO of the cabin in Chiang Mai. And the cabin in Chiang Mai is the leading provider in Asia of mental health and addiction services. So Sudi was born in Providence, Rhode Island, into a family steeped in medicine. Sudi has lived in several global cities throughout the United States, in Bangkok, Abu Dhabi, and currently resides in Chiang Mai, Thailand. And Sudi has held key leadership positions in prominent organizations, including at the Cleveland Clinic in Abu Dhabi, Bangkok Hospital in Bangkok, where he helped establish their global reputation. His experience spans medical device manufacturing, healthcare management, and global business development. Sudi has led the cabin's expansion and positioned the company as a leader in Asia's mental health and addiction services. And his extraordinary leadership focuses on basically improving patient outcomes and operation efficiencies with a strong commitment to innovation and excellence in healthcare services. So, Sudi, welcome to the podcast. And please reintroduce yourself, pronounce your name appropriately, whatever you want the viewers to know.
Sure. Thank you, Karen. I really appreciate that. Now, you got my name right. So I go by Sudi. My last name's Narasimhan, as you said. I'm born and raised in the U.S. I grew up, spent the first 30 plus years of my life in the U.S. I was actually trained as an engineer. And then I first moved out to Asia in the early 2000s, 2006, working for a medical device manufacturer and basically running a business for them. It was a global business, but they had facilities in Thailand. And not too far after that, I started working for hospitals. So I went from basically working to make medical devices where doctors and practitioners in hospitals were our customer to directly working with those institutions. And I got into that more than 10 years ago, starting with Bumrung Rod Hospital, which is really, really great hospital. It's the most internationally visited hospital in the world. So they do more international um, medical tourist visits than the whole country of India combined. So
Oh,
it's really an
I didn't know
amazing
that.
hospital. Yeah, so they do something like 1.2 million episodes of care, in other words, visits per year, and something like 600,000 come from 190 countries. So between expats and then travelers like that. So it's a really amazing hospital. It's one of these hospitals where it's multi-specialty. Someone could come in to see a specialist without an appointment, be seen in 15 minutes. Which is, coming from the US, you have to go through all these different gatekeepers and specialists and getting tests done. Everything's vertically integrated. So it's a really great care model, and I really learned a lot about the healthcare industry through working there under a really tremendous mentor and leader, and really helped them build a international footprint for medical travelers and visitors coming in. And then I took that experience then to Cleveland Clinic, which is a US brand, but got a lot of exposure with their facility in Abu Dhabi, where they were really looking at trying to develop their own ability to draw patients from around the world for their specialties, and then using my own experience there. So I was with them for a number of years. And then I came back to Thailand and I was doing consulting for different types of healthcare practitioners and service providers and started to get involved with the cabin that way. And I've been leading the cabin for the last 4 years, and it's been a really, really fun experience. I've had some experience with mental health, allied health, providing behavioral health services before in the hospital sector, but really this is one where it's really a dedicated focus. So we're helping people with everything from addictions to substance abuse or alcohol, to things like process addictions like gambling or sex addiction, and other related issues around depression, anxiety, trauma. And we find that the presentation of clients that we see nowadays really is a combination of different things. So as there's a famous practitioner, Dr. Gabor Mate, who would basically link a lot of things related to trauma in terms of addiction, and as a source, the underlying source is trauma based, and basically, getting addicted or trying to find something to soothe that is basically a symptomatic type behavior. So, but nevertheless, we see a lot of individuals that are suffering from across a number of conditions, and basically our 30-bed rehab in Chiang Mai. Most of our patients come to us, they're from the U.S. or Canada, the U.K. or continental Europe, Australia, Middle East, and then you get these other expat cities like Singapore, Hong Kong, Dubai, Tokyo, where there's not a good range of services locally there. All those places are quite close to Thailand because Thailand's a very visited hub in the world. And so people can discreetly get services privately and basically get well without really interrupting other parts of their life. So it's been a real blessing and honor to be in this field. It's been the most gratifying work I've done in my life. So I really, really am blessed to be able to be part of it. Yeah, just because of the change factor you can make in people's life.
Sudi, that's amazing. I have so many questions for you. And my very first is, what brought you to this path? Because this is you're quite seasoned in experience at a relatively young age. So what brought you down this path to get even into medical device sales, to then leadership of medicine and so forth?
Yeah, a great question. It's easy to connect your life looking backwards, but looking forwards, no idea. And so, for me, I can say I was just a curious person. I've always wanted to learn more, and I was always open-minded to be able to travel, which is also why, I was willing to, move halfway around the world or make another move to the Middle East or whatnot at different points in my career. Just more trying to connect with being open-minded to something larger, and then trying to see if, how you can use your skills and abilities to connect to that. So I actually started my career as an engineer. I'm actually a mechanical and aerospace engineer. So I have like a master's degree in that. So I started my first job was actually in aerospace, making aircraft wheels and brakes. And it turns out that that skill set then transfers to medical devices because, there's so much around safety with regard to planes to make sure planes don't fall out of the sky. Most of the things that happen related to planes normally aren't mechanical errors or design errors, with the exception of a few. I think Boeing had a few strings of issues with some of their designs, but I think that since then that's been fixed. But generally speaking, there's a lot of design work to make airplanes safe. If you think of the number of flights that happen every day, and really the number of incidents, you might see incidents like hopefully once every decade or every couple of years. But if you look at the millions of trips taken, that means that by design it's really, really safe. So really those principles can be sort of ported over into like the medical device and the hospital space. And whilst hospitals and those devices are pretty safe, they're nowhere near as safe as aerospace. So it's almost like borrowing from a framework of something that's ultra safe, and then bring it to something that's pretty good, but not as good. So it's trying to make it better. So that was really the way I made that jump. And then really from medical devices into a healthcare provider was one of just understanding we're making something for our customer who are doctors and practitioners. We're always interviewing and working with them. So it's then pretty easy to then say, okay, let's make the leap of like, now we're actually a provider, and we go one level to the front where effectively we're looking at from a patient perspective, how are they making choices? And then really
Mm,
from that field into uh, the treatment space for what I do now, what's kind of interesting is I would say like if I look at it from the big picture, like you can say like modern medicine, the practices today in terms of specialized medicine, it's like 100-year-old field or 120-year-old field. I mean, if you look further back, a lot of it was just more, maybe more like uh, just some general practices.
yeah.
And it wasn't really systematized in terms of the scientific method as much as before. I think if you look at Joseph Lister and then things like sanitization, I mean, this is within the range of 100+ years. Now, if I then take that analogy towards mental health and then the framework for treating
Mm,
people in addiction, I would say it's a much younger field. So whilst you might have something like, AA and Alcoholics Anonymous in terms of the creation of that, that would be like something like 90 years old. And that was a really, really amazing framework in terms of being able to help people, because before that, people didn't really have a good mechanism. So it's a really lot of great work done there. But I would say in terms of then taking it to something that might be more modern treatment methods, I would say the pioneer for that was actually in the USA, in Minnesota, what they call the
Mm,
Hazleton model. And that was really in the late 1980s or early 1990s. And I'd say before that, a lot of treatment for, addiction or even mental health might be institutionalization, trying to pull people away from society, or you could say a lot of it was very punitive or shame-based.
yeah.
So a
Yeah.
lot of the early treatment was like, okay, kind of shame based, saying you're an addict, you're not responsible enough, and these really, really hard punitive measures. And I would say really that model, that Minnesota model, so called, really started then look at different modalities and framework like cognitive behavior therapy, and looking at really the whys and trying to treat that more as a medical condition and not a will based, like a
Mm,
failure of will condition. And I think that's quite an important distinction, because, I think the way I look at it is, if someone is if we take the example for addiction, they're basically engaged in this pattern of suffering where they're unable to change it. They've tried to change it, they're not able to do it. And then now it actually becomes from a failure of will to maybe a medical condition. So we wouldn't demonize someone for, let's say someone has cancer and they happen to be a smoker and that was causative, to then say, well, I told you so, it was because of this, and in a punishing type mode. Instead, it's like, okay, well, let's try to help you fix this disease that you've got. And so I think it's taking that same model towards mental health and addiction. And so I'd say with it being only 40 years old, I would say that as a younger field, there's more paths in terms of like different phases of treatment and shifts in modality. And this might link into the work that you do with some of the psychedelic assisted therapy. So I'd say
yeah.
some of the the earlier phases of it, maybe we're treating addiction separately, and then later on folding in dual diagnosis and trauma and mental health into addiction, and starting to realize it's coming from the same root. And so I would say as an evolving field, what's kind of exciting is there's an element of being at the cutting edge, and really for our model that we have is we try to we like look to try to find out the best practice of different evidence-based, or a way to try to find out which type of tools there in the field are efficacious for treating
Hmm.
clients, versus some that are maybe just very, very a lot of buzz around it, but at the same time it's sort of untested. And
Yeah.
it's kind of a process to figure that out. So that's part of what we do. That's part of our vision mission. The other part is experience based. So if someone travels to a place like Thailand, which is just an amazing place, that people are really, they're very present in the moment. They're very kind. It's a very hospitable place. It's got an amazing climate, just the different types of nature and whatnot. And there's a sense of peace in the environment. So
Mm,
the other part of what we try to offer is really the experiential element of it, because my view is, as leading it, is that if someone is taking this investment in time and funds to come and get well, it's really important for them to have a really good experience about the whole journey. So it's beyond the tools and the modalities they pick up. It's really should be a special time in their life. And our goal is to try to help people get well for the long term, but for this to be a very special part of their experience of getting well. And really that helps us, because our biggest source of advertisement or whatnot is people who've gotten well, who just tell someone else their experience, and they're completely unbiased. It's very authentic, and that's
mm.
very compelling for someone else. So it's the old-fashioned way, word of mouth, and it's sort of like earned, case by case. So that's what we try to do.
That's so beautiful, Sudi. It's so, I mean, I know being a therapist once in Thailand, the cabin didn't exist when I was a therapist in Phuket. And when it first was created, I remember having this profound relief come over me. And just over the years, seeing the services that have been added on and added on and added on, you really are front and center in the progressive movement of mental health treatment. Even compared to things in the United States or England, Australia, the cabin really is forward facing. And I love what you just said about wanting this to be a good experience, not just mental health treatment. And it just kind of brings me back to the whole mind, body, spirit connection too. Like if we're really going to
Yes,
treat the origin of a problem, which I also do see everything through trauma, then we need to also be treating the spirit, right? And sometimes these efficacious models don't necessarily address that. So
that's right.
having the facility offer that and the ambiance, the essence, of that facility, which the cabin offers, I think is profoundly important rather than some hospital setting where there's bright neon lights and no warmth to
Yes,
it.
some places are very clinical, and actually, you're right about it. When I talk to people, a lot of times I'll say this is. You could also say at one level a disease of the spirit. It depends on the audience. I mean, if it's a bunch of
Yeah.
scientists and therapists like that, they might look at me sideways if I say that. But I think really we're talking about it is a mind, body, spirit. You know, human as individuals, we've got everything going on, right? So if we try to, sometimes specialized medicine tries to separate everything and treat by parts, and that can be useful in the sense of zeroing down on something. But the cost of that is you lose the holistic element of it. But we also focus on the holistic element as well. So really trying to integrate that and then make space for the team in terms of, you know, we've got a number of different leaders in our team. I'd say we have something like 20 multidisciplinary specialists that have several hundred years of experience, lived experience, plus yeah, treatment experience in our team, and really trying to introduce something to them. So in terms of building consensus, and you know, it's a matter of bringing right people on the team and then letting them run with it, but at the same time also trying to help make it better and raise it up. So it's kind of it requires a lot of organizational experience and being able to build and retain a really strong team. So fortunately, those are the skills I've picked up over my career. So that I think I'm in the right place at the right time. So again, I feel quite blessed to be part of this.
Well, how lucky they are too, that you know and you have that wisdom that the team is vitally important. It's not just
Very much,
numbers. You have to have the right
very much,
experience, right? Plus the right model. Yeah.
very much.
You know, you were talking about your path of aerospace engineering to then medical devices to then
Yes.
healthcare systems to then mental health. I couldn't help but to think of systems thinking,
Hmm.
and you mentioned that you're a very curious person,
Yeah.
and when I first met you, that was the first thought I had about, oh, look at this really bright, intelligent, curious human being here. But your ability to think of the whole system and mental health doesn't necessarily have that yet. You know, like you said, we needed to prove that certain approaches worked. And so we
Yeah.
needed to have like the hour standard sessions or the 30-day treatment model with one approach to determine outcomes. And yet, because of that, we kind of lost the systems thinking. And it sounds like you have implemented that at the cabin. There's like a system.
Well, a framework to keep working on it. I would say that we're not perfect and it's not done yet, but I think we have a path on how we continually absorb different types of, as things come out that are new, to be able to look at it, pilot it, integrate it, and then really try to make choices around, you know, what type of model fits. Because a lot of the work we do is not just holistic and therapy sessions, but we also handpick people to form a community where you have this other effect where people are helping each other get well, and that creates a very powerful effect because you can imagine like you know, if you're to, this is probably a limited analogy but it might work for this example. Like if you think about when you're going to some sort of training or school or something together, you get the effect of learning that's directed from someone who's sharing knowledge, but you also have a peer effect. And the peer effect
Mm,
kind of, you know, sometimes if you're struggling with something, if a peer helps you to say, look at it this way, it can be more powerful. And then the other element of it is if you're if you kind of got it and then you end up sharing it with someone else, it makes it stronger for yourself. Like the model they use in medicine is when they train someone like, you know, like a doctor, someone for an apprentice doing a procedure, this is simplified, but they'll basically say, see one, do one, teach one. And that combination of all three, especially the last part of it, if you're able to articulate it and share it with someone else, now you've got the framework right in your mind. And now your memory for it is really good. So generally we can't, I mean, if you're trying to remember just random facts or things abstract, I mean, that might be useful in trivia, but usually the best way to create good memories if you have a framework to integrate stuff in. And so when you talk about systems thinking and being curious about learning different things, part of my mind is trying to connect it to previous knowledge. And then it turns out that if you have a bunch of different models to go to, you can actually try to help, you know, get a better sense of how the world works. It's still not perfect, but it gives you more tools to work with. And so a lot of things I've done with this mental health space is I've actually borrowed a lot of the framework from hospitals. And I would say maybe that's a bit new for our industry because we're so young. generally speaking, we tend to have either people who are business people who don't understand this practice, or they might have been in recovery themselves, they're running a center, or we have someone
Hmm.
who's like clinician led, but they might not have the other experience. So if you could, I mean, for example, the things in the hospital I try to bring in terms of like our treatment style would be like the framework for leadership. So in a hospital model, you don't have non-clinical people making clinical decisions. So in other words, clinicians are empowered
Nice.
and they kind of stay in a separate lane. And typically they stay out of the commercial decisions for clients, because if you're advocating for someone, you're just looking at their best care, and that's really the primary focus. So they don't need to worry about things like, okay, how much is being charged and whatnot like that. It should be separate. And another one might be a lot of what we do in a hospital is we just look at like a safety and risk framework. So in other words, we look at
Mm.
like, okay, how can people get hurt? You know, they could have a fall, they could basically different things they could do to have some potential injury or something, or something that's going to interfere with their treatment. And then how can we then de-risk that? So have a system that's better in place to prevent that from happening, or something to lower the frequency of occurrence, or to be able to detect conditions of that before it happens. So, I mean, that's the same thing we use from aerospace engineering, actually. So it's an old tool that we brought, you know, to other fields like that. So this is what I mean about kind of borrowing things that already exist, not having to reinvent the wheel. And it turns out that if you can just be curious and look around, a lot of problems have been solved in other fields. They just need to be readapted. So for me,
Absolutely.
this is fun. I mean, this is like I really enjoy this, because not only is it a fun puzzle to solve, but the payoff of helping people and getting it right is so important. So it's really worth the effort. Yeah,
Oh, I can tell, like, even as you're talking about the passion coming out of you, it's so
yeah.
beautiful to witness.
Oh,
It reminds me of the whole movement right now of trauma-informed care in hospitals and
yes,
clinics, right? And
yes,
and as a trauma therapist myself, I've had so many referrals of folks that have been re-traumatized by
yes,
being in a hospital setting or being in a treatment facility that didn't have, like, a holistic approach, or they're trying to be fit into a box that they did not fit into,
yes,
right? And so, yeah, I'm just
exactly.
curious about the trauma-informed aspect of the cabin. How do you guys
Yeah.
kind of manage through that?
Yeah, great question. So, I mean, I can answer that in so many levels. I sent a video of our place, just was taken with a phone to yourself to get the vibe of it. I'd love you to come see our center. But I think the first thing is when you walk in, the feeling is kind of more like a resort. I mean, there's safeguards in place because it is a treatment center, and we are trying to help people in terms of having structure. It's not completely open-ended because it has to be safe. But at the same time, from a feeling perspective, it just feels like a really nice boutique resort. It's a very comfortable environment. It's very welcoming in terms of the other clients and patients who are there. They're also, like I said, kind of screened and handpicked, so it's very welcoming. People are sort of brought in not only by the staff but also the community. And sometimes I get people visiting, or sometimes loved ones when a family comes in. They're like, "This doesn't look like a treatment center." You know, they're used to like something like a ward. And I said, "No, no, it really is." And when I explain it to them, they're like, "Wow, this can be done." So it's like, yeah, sure, sure it can. So I think the environment helps a lot, and I think having a natural environment. So as we come through our facility, we're right by the river. So we have a bunch of canals through the facility. So we basically pump river water up and then run it through the canals, and we've got fish in the canals and frogs, and you hear bird song all the time. It changes depending on what happens in the day, you know, if there are clouds or if it's sunny, if there's rain. It just feels very natural. And so that feeling and that sound of running water immediately just feels like you almost go into parasympathetic just as you exhale. Ha, you can just like
Yeah.
feel that. And it allows you to sort of just breathe and sort of just have some space, because I think it's important to have that right energy. It's very hard to be able to go into talk therapy or be able to process things unless you're in a very calm state. So I think the physical environment really helps. That's one foundational level for in terms of trauma-informed care. I would say the other aspect of it really has to do with our therapeutic practice in terms of the team. So if I look at the team that we have something like 8 different therapists. Um, m- Pretty much all of them are very trauma informed. We have a lot of other modalities that are very trauma based in terms of grounding exercises, breath work, trauma release. EMDR. So, I mean, these normally take place after someone grounds, but we have, in terms of the path for individuals to be able to, for clients to be able to address things related to getting to the root of trauma. It does take time though, and isn't all done on one day. It's almost a series of different steps that take place. But really, getting people grounded and stabilized is very important. In our treatment model that we have, we also have, so it's not just the therapy side of it, we actually have a strong team for holistic treatment. And so our holistic practitioners are doing multimodal types of treatment. So basically
Hmm.
sound healing, from Tibetan bowls to things like breath work and yoga and movement-based therapy. Um, Mindfulness meditation. So we have a little Buddhist temple on the site as well, which is a really special place actually. We have I think we have one of the few footprints of the Buddha that was actually commissioned by the first king of Thailand, the Rama I era. So it's actually physically got a lot of really nice um, pieces to it in terms of that element of from the holistic type treatment. And many people who do come to Thailand, just like maybe your audience and people that follow, are very interested in Buddhism and practice. And it does turn out that a lot of the things related to Buddhism do also map with different modalities of treatment. So whether it's 12-step found base in terms of principles or other types of aspects with regard to just being able to surrender and sort of acceptance and just focus on the present
Mhm.
moment. So our holistic treatment leans into that. We also have other elements on site where we have like a spa and massage center. So our program includes like therapeutic massage for either Thai traditional massage or aroma oil massage, and that really helps with a lot of the work people do physically, because we also have personalized physical trainers too. So when people come in, effectively the
Goodness.
journey, yeah, we'll meet them at the airport. We'll do a previous assessment with them before they come in. So we have a few levels of assessment, one with our our admissions team, as well as a second level with our clinical director. And again, that's to make sure that if someone's traveling from far, we want to make sure we can help them, right? So it's about making sure that what we offer really matches people's needs, and also that they fit very well in the community. So that combination is important. But when they first come in, Karen, so they're met at the airport with a member of our support team. We pick them up. We have our own private transport that we bring them over to the site. Once they come to the site, they meet with our nursing team, so we can assess them, physically, as well as trying to take stock of where they're at. Sometimes people, when they travel, they feel quite anxious. Some people end up drinking a lot on the flight. Some people are just really tired, and some people feel,
Mm.
just different levels of it. So it's really trying to help support them and then do that proper intake. And that really guides some of the things they're able to do or not do at the first start while they stabilize. And we have a psychiatrist to meet with them also when they come on site. So if they need any stabilization with regard to, we're not as heavy as other markets in terms of just treating everything with medication, but there's certain times that are appropriate. So if someone is detoxing on certain types of substances, they might need some sort of medical assisted support. And so we're able to provide that through them from a medical team. So that's sort of the starting point. Then shortly after that, they'll be met with their therapist. And because we have so many therapists relative to the number of clients, we sort of keep it to like less than a ratio of 4 clients to one therapist, which is
Oh my
it's quite
goodness.
strong. Yeah, so you can
That's
imagine on our
amazing.
site, yeah, we actually have
Wow.
80 staff looking after 20 clients. So and some of those are
Wow.
clinical, some of those are non-clinical, like restaurant and support and things like this. So we can offer a lot of personalized care for people. And the program that we have, actually, we give people something like 63 hours of clinical treatment in a week. And that's a combination of the one-on-one therapy, group therapy, holistic treatment, massage, fitness, excursions. And we're able to do that for a very affordable price. So, and we provide accommodations and food, and effectively we charge at the moment something like $5,000 per week, or 20,000 for 4 weeks US. So if you divide that 63 hours a week, we're able to offer
Oh,
that for something like
yeah,
$80 an hour, which is really a good value for money if you factor in that your
absolutely.
food and accommodation is covered as well. And so yeah,
Wow.
we can only do that in Thailand, but really it's
Yeah.
kind of the intention of the design. But going
Right.
back to your question about trauma focused, I think that recipe can really try to help people address trauma and help them sit well and ground, and then start to explore with a qualified therapist some of the things that may be a cause of trauma, whether it's childhood development or other types of issues, and really have time to work with and sit with and process that. That typically takes several weeks, to do it well. And everyone's unique and different. So if someone comes in and they might have some complex substance use disorder, addiction, that requires some level of treatment and stabilization before really trying to address some of this. Sometimes I'm skeptical of places that just say, come on in, we'll do EMDR, and we'll come into that, because if someone isn't ready, you're gonna, to your point,
Yeah.
you'll actually make it worse. So I think
Re-traumatize
it's,
them.
yeah,
Yeah.
re-traumatize them. Right,
Yes.
exactly. So it's
Yeah.
trying to do it safely and with qualification. And with our team, we're constantly providing training, supervision. We're presenting at conferences. We're also taking in knowledge. So it's a matter of trying to stay current. And like I said, it's a young field, and
Yeah.
so all of us are quite curious and hungry to try to stay at that cutting edge. And it's fun. It's a journey, and then we can sort of help try to do our part in writing it. And a lot of times our holistic approach has then been adopted in markets like the UK because they've seen that work very well, and then perhaps some places in the US as well. Obviously, that has to be localized with what can be done in the resources. Like, for example, at the excursions, we'll take people to some of the excursions we have every week. Uh, One of them might be to bathe the elephants, take care of
Oh,
elephants, and
wow.
yeah. So it turns out, like, I mean, people do equine therapy with horses, of course, but with
Yeah.
pachyotherapy, you could say a lot of elephants have personalities just like people do, right? So some elephants, we've seen, and they also live 80 to 100 years old, so similar lifespan as a human. And we've seen elephants where, for example, they had a miscarriage or something or lost a child, and they have this deep trauma, and you can see clients
Yeah.
connecting to that. And once you know the elephant's story, you can kind of get a good sense of how they are, and it's quite special. It's really, you see that connection with people, and with clients and even staff with that. We learn something about ourselves in that type of environment, but it's being able to kind of see that and resonate with it. So that might be hard to do that, particularly in other places that aren't tropical, but it's a matter of just finding what are the holistic elements that really lean into the experience for the client and make that therapeutic.
Oh God, it makes me want to go there right now, frankly. Yeah.
I'll, well, I'll take you around there for sure to one of those basically elephant sanctuaries that we work with.
So if you can still hear me, Sudi, it sounds like you also have another. Do you need to grab your headphones?
Yeah, it's popped out. Sorry, I got it.
You
Yes.
got it?
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, everything's okay.
Y-
Sorry about that.
Oh, no worries, no worries. So you also have another facility that you are opening. So do you want to speak to
Yes.
that a little bit?
Yes. We're opening another facility actually just to keep things interesting in Greece, in an island called Crete, which is southern Greece, right in the Mediterranean, um, furthest southeastern part of Europe, really. That's really sunny with great weather year round. So at the cabin, we've had a number of different programs. The program I was describing is more of a general community program where we're taking people from, you know, across genders, binary, non-binary, full age range, from basically 18 until mid 70s, and that program works really well. We've had a program really in the past in the cabin, really before COVID, which is a dedicated cohort called The Edge. It was a program geared towards young men, really, roughly between ages 18 and 28, but really it's more of a stage rather than age in terms of trying to bring individuals together. And really, the idea there was that we found that having a strong community where people are focused on things like fitness, adventure, challenge-based focus, as well as building a tight community combined with therapy, really has helped people get well. And that program, we've treated more than 600 or 700 clients over the years. And I see the byproduct of that program where I see people in recovery for about 7 or 8 years now, and now they're actually becoming practitioners and giving back. So when I see a program where I see the results, that I know it works, and I see the therapist behind it, we basically took that combination of the program and therapist and brought that closer to Europe in the Mediterranean. And because we do get a lot of clients coming out of Europe as well, we saw there is a need for this type of community. And if I describe the type of client that would come through there, it would be someone who's in that age range where basically they found out that they're struggling with something that's going on. Oftentimes, it might be ADHD related or neurodiversity or lack of focus or motivation. Sometimes we describe it as high ego, low self-esteem. Sometimes we also
Mm,
describe it as things like failure to launch. Probably when I describe this, probably everyone has an idea of someone they know that might fit in this category. But you know, because I think it's quite common now, and I think it's probably getting worse as time goes by post-COVID because there's more isolation, more people are on devices. You know, it's driving more of these underlying things. Like if we look at links between ADHD and some of these other causal factors, they do exist. And I would say they might have tried outpatient therapy. They might have even tried inpatient therapy, but they find they can't sit in a circle. They can't focus. They're not vibing with that type of that treatment model. So effectively, what we're doing is really doing. There's a combination of that movement therapy, that activity-based therapy, and the way we
right.
structure the program, we sort of bring that energy out before we bring them later in the afternoon in terms of the one-on-one and the group work like that. And then an individual might say, I don't want to go to a certain center because that isn't working for me, might also be drawn to something that we do in terms of that balance of different skills and therapy. So in the island of Crete, because it's mountainous and you're right on the sea, in the summer it's not that hot, in the winter it's not that cold. So right now we're in December, the temperatures there are in the 60s in the day, and in the night it's like 50s. It's like California weather. It's a Mediterranean climate. And then in the
Nice.
summer, when it's really hot in Europe, and if it's 100 Fahrenheit, in Northern Europe, it's still in the 80s down there, because of the sea effect. And then you have a lot of sunny days year round because of the location. And so really we're able to offer things like rock climbing, mountain biking, sailing, surfing, picking up different types of skills. And I think a lot of times to help individuals with that cohort, it's around giving them agency and the ability to demonstrate that they can learn new skills and do things. And that builds up their self-esteem and helps them for other challenges and tasks and other life skills as well. So typically when people go through this program, they kind of learn how to prepare a meal or learn cooking skills. They learn how to take care of themselves a little bit better in terms of basic functioning. And then the other element is really working in the community with others. So it's that effect of pulling other
Good.
people up when they first come in, and then
Mhm.
likewise other people pull them up too. So I think that aspect of being accountable to someone else, and also really being in a community where you're really sharing experiences with other people. Again, that might be an issue where before there might be a lot of isolation. And a lot of times also sometimes people in this group, they might be experimenting with substances because of maybe trauma at the root of it,
Yeah.
or also just trying to soothe some of these feelings. So, with ADHD or whatnot, sometimes it might be sometimes a substance might alleviate that, make that feel more manageable. But then sometimes we find that people experiment too far and they find themselves stuck on something. So, but they might be young enough where if someone says, okay, well, you're an addict, you need to stop for life or whatnot, they still have their whole life in front of them. So maybe the more measured approach is like, well, let's stop that for now and see what we can do to fix the other stuff. And then instead of having a goal to say, okay, just stop this for life, it's like, well, why don't you just try for 6 months or 1 year and see how you get on? And here are some
Nice.
tools and framework to help you. It's about trying to help people meet people where they are for this phase of their life. So I'm happy to that we're launching this in Crete. We already have a site and a team and the program set up. We actually start seeing clients from mid-January of next year. And I believe in the
Oh,
U.S., I
great.
think we can help people, coming from the U.S. because from, the U.S. to Athens is a reasonable flight, to fly over to Europe, and it offers a good alternative to some of the centers within the U.S. So yeah, quite
Well, this
excited
is
to do that.
amazing. This is incredible. So, and you mentioned it was 18 to 28. Is that still what
Yes.
the program is for?
Yes.
18 to 28.
Yes. I
Okay.
mean, it could be a little
Yeah.
bit lower on either end or higher on the other end, just depending on case by case. So, but generally, roughly speaking, about that age range. Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. And you mentioned, is it male identifying patients?
Well, that's correct. That's correct as
Okay.
well. So we're
Okay.
able to take care of that. And so I think the best way is for us to be able to talk to people on an individual basis and then try to find out the best fit for them. So yes, that's correct.
So neat. And I have that annoying question I must ask because if there's a viewer listening
Please.
right now,
Yes, please
I, I,
do.
I would imagine getting into the finances here.
Oh, yes.
What about US insurance? Like, is there any Is that does that ever work if we have a US viewer right now or a European
Yes,
viewer? Is there ever
yes.
insurance that covers going abroad for treatment?
We've had that. It depends. It's a great question, and I'm glad you asked it, so I didn't forget to talk about it. So it depends on the insurance. What we typically do is help the client or the family vet that and look through it. We've had a lot of cases where insurance does cover treatment, and but it just has to be filling out some paperwork, which we can help with. In some cases, it's full. In other cases, it's partial. But it really depends on what type of offering is available there. Um,
I
so
see.
um, so it's
Uh-huh.
worth looking into if people have a question, we can help try to go through that for sure.
And Sudi, I know that you and I talked offline that your services and your centers obviously don't offer psychedelic assisted therapy now because it's yet to be legal. But
Yes.
I am curious, if you can speak a little bit. It's becoming more and more
Yes.
mainstream here in the
Yes,
West, and more and
definitely.
more states
Definitely.
are passing psilocybin and things like this.
Yes.
So I'm just curious if you have any personal experience you'd like to share, or
Yes.
clinically what your
Yes.
thoughts are
Yes.
about that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, for myself personally, I kind of mentioned I'm a curious person. I think that that's probably true since my whole life. So, when I was in university, as in college, I experimented with, psychedelics as well. And I found that to be, for me, it was a positive experience. And I didn't go back to it. It was enough for me.
Mhm.
That was more than 30 years
Yeah.
ago now. But,
Uh-huh.
but it's been, I think we have a medical advisory board that actually helps guide us in terms of different types of treatment modalities, and they did bring up psychedelic assisted therapy, and I think it's something that we are looking at and studying. At least with respect to Thailand, one of the things that we do is we follow advice from the Thai Medical Council, which is the equivalent of like the AMA in the U.S. And effectively, they haven't really approved psychedelic assisted therapy at this time, but they're looking at it experimentally in the teaching hospitals. They've only recently started to approve ketamine assisted therapy, where they're using that really in a clinic with basically a doctor in the hospital, but really
Yeah.
trying to have a mixed model with a therapist with them. That's only a few months ago. So I think we are looking at different types of aspects. That being said, in our main site within Thailand, we try to follow a taper down to basically zero. You can call it abstinence-based model, simply because we know that works for so many presentations. And for example, in markets like the UK, where there's a lot of ketamine-assisted therapy, you do find some folks where they sort of got down the path where they're getting too much availability of ketamine, and now they're using it recreationally,
Uh,
plus other
yeah.
substances. So it was sort of given to them in the interest of therapy. It didn't really complete the therapeutic episode, and then now they're in a state where they're still using it for soothing as well as other
Yeah.
things, and they find it's causing physical symptoms and other addictions. So we're trying to help those type of folks. So we need to make sure that we get the tone of how we're separating the cohort and not confusing what the model is. And of course, I guess it was probably Hippocrates or one of these other folks from Greece, where they basically said the difference between medicine and poison is the dosage, right? So
Oh,
a
I
lot of it
love that.
has to do, a lot of it
Yes.
has to do
Yes.
with basically how much they're having. So and then what that framework is. So like I said, it's a cutting edge field. We're looking at it. Watch this space. We might be exploring that a bit further, but at the moment, we're not doing that in our center in Thailand.
Yeah, it makes sense, and thank you for answering the question, and you're obviously answering it with a very progressive lens, looking at it. So, with what you just mentioned, I like to think about things through self-agency, whether that's an intrinsic, right, locus of control,
Yes.
or extrinsic. And so if someone
Yes.
is starting to use ketamine
Yes.
extrinsically, that's not the treatment, right? The whole point of
Exactly.
using ketamine-assisted psychotherapy is to build intrinsic resource,
That's
self-agency,
right.
right?
That's right.
Self-capacity.
That's right.
So, yeah, and that is unfortunate. That is a risk of any of the psychedelics. And
Yes.
we as the therapist need to be monitoring that consistently. So there's not a dependency that's developed because like you said, that defeats the whole point of treatment.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the thing. When it's a new field, basically, we try to do something that helps people. Then we find that there's some portion of people it's not working for. So then we use that to try to get better and improve the framework. So, it's the intentions are quite good, and it is a modern, cutting edge field, a new field. But then we have to kind of keep iterating to make sure we get it right. And I mean, cancer followed something similar for the treatment of cancer. A lot of the first generation therapeutics let's say early chemotherapy, that's basically a poison that's being brought in, and that's causing a lot of damage as well. But the goal is that the benefit would exceed the level of harm. But in some cases, some individuals, that's not true. So then there are better screening tools to look at genetics or having targeted therapy, molecular-based therapy. So it's this process of trying to get better. So I think if we look at the larger framework, the larger system, and keep that in mind, we can try to keep improving like that. So I mean, that's the way I try to answer, because sometimes people say either or, this is bad, this is good. It says, well, it depends where you are in the progression. This might be the stepping stone that helps you get to something further on. So yeah.
So, Sudi, that brings up another thing, which would be my dream if there was a therapeutic center here in the States, or even increasing your therapeutic services at the cabin, is there's molecular genetic testing now, right? Where an
Yes.
individual can find out what their reaction to ketamine is, or an SSRI or
Yes.
SSNRI, and we
Yes,
can
that's right.
know in advance before taking the medicine. And it's sad that that is just not paid for. Like, clients have to pay out of pocket for that kind of determination, and it just seems like that should be the very first step that's taken even before any treatment, right? And
Oh,
that
yeah.
might help the outliers, those that become dependent on a psychedelic versus those that are healing from a psychedelic, and avoid people going through 3 rounds of SSRIs two and a
Yes.
half years in, and then they find out, oh, those SSRIs were not good for their biology, you
Right.
know? And we
Right.
can know from the beginning.
That's
So,
a great point.
yeah, that would be a dream too, just like you said. I mean, we have to be connecting all the pieces of the pie chart, and our
Yes,
genetics is a big piece of that.
definitely. I mean,
Yeah.
I would say that a lot of the genetic tests, I mean, there are new ones that are coming out every few months in terms of a new panel, right? And then some of that is genetic, epigenetic factors like that. And then typically when they do show a certain expression of a positive, it requires basically someone like a scientist to be able to explain and interpret it. So let's say someone does a test by themselves and they find out they've got BRCA1, BRCA2, two genes that determine one has a higher chance of breast cancer. Well, it's really important to talk to a practitioner and not just say, okay, I need to get removal done or whatnot, because actually it's not 100%. It's more still probabilistic, but it does tell you, it guides you things. So it's a combination of having different specialists. I would say what complicates the model in the US is because in Asia here, or a lot of the markets I've worked with, because I'm familiar with markets around the world, where the patient is the payer, a lot of times then the provider can basically tune things for what they need. In places like the US, the patient's not the payer, the payer is an insurance company or the government. And then so now you basically have the provider trying to answer to the payer and the patient, which makes things really distorted. And then you can imagine from someone who's the payer, they're trying to say, right, if I authorize this as a covered test, whatever I have coverage from and get more of. So you can imagine if you have an elective test and you say, right, if you do genetic testing, well, now the whole population will just say, I want to just get more and more of this. And then now the payer is like, okay, how do I pay for this? So it's this combination of saying, how do I make sure that this is right and not overutilized? it's I it's a tough system to solve. So even if everyone has the greatest intentions, it's sort of guaranteed to cause frustration just by design. So yeah, I don't if it was easy, it would be fixed already. And you've got all
I
these great
totally.
people looking at it, but it's and then to complicate things, every person in the system is a stakeholder. Once they have a business focusing on one element of it, they want to make sure they don't get, basically outmoded or whatever. They don't get, disrupted. So everyone's trying to protect what they do. So then, of course, that creates another problem too. So it's a
Exactly.
tough one. It's a tough
It's
one.
a
And
tough one.
if everyone looks at it, it's kind of like, okay, well, the hospitals don't make a lot of margin. The insurance, they used to not make a lot of margin. Maybe they're making more, but they're sort of under the spotlight right now. And then from the patient's perspective, they're paying a lot for insurance and not getting coverage. So sort of everyone's unhappy to some extent. And it's really hard to
Totally.
blame one person because it's like very distributed. So
It's a system.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. Exactly.
Years ago, I worked at United Healthcare, and I remember the utilization review. At first, I didn't understand their role, and then I started to really appreciate the UR role.
Yeah.
And now that I'm a private practice psychotherapist and I only accept private pay, about 5 years ago, I started to scratch my head like, wait, why am I only seeing someone for 50 minutes? They're paying me privately. And so I
Right.
started to change my psychotherapy model to make
Amazing.
it 2 hours, 4 hours,
Of
or 8 hour
course.
intensive all day, because
Right.
why not? Right. And so even those
Yes.
kind of things, like thinking outside the box, like,
Very
why do
much.
we have a standard psychotherapy hour of treatment when someone might need 3 hours? Right. And so
Exactly.
that health savings account idea and concept really
Yes.
helps with that.
Yes.
But your point, if there's not like a utilization review, what happens if someone blows their, HSA account in the first 3 months of the year, and then they still
Yes.
need treatment and they
Who's
don't have
helping
anything
who's
for that?
helping them manage that? That's the thing,
Exactly.
right? So, yeah, there's a lot of factors to consider. And what I was drawn about yourself when I met you, Karen, is that someone who's learned Thai and another language like that from visiting, and all the roles that you've had, I think you've done so many things. You've got your systems thinker basically, and having a lot of experience in different roles allows you to have more tools to access, so to speak, and experiences when it comes to helping solve a unique person's individuals' issues like that. So it makes you a better therapist. It just makes you, same thing with podcasting, with all the guests that you have had and will have in the future. You just pick up so many bits of knowledge, and then you connect that to just provide more access to different ways of finding solutions. So I think it's really an outstanding thing. Yeah, kindred spirits. I'm glad I met you.
A Absolutely, Sudi. That's exactly what I said when I walked away from meeting you. I said, "Oh my gosh, what a kindred spirit." And, I will say with the comment that you just made, I don't know about your experience, but now that you've lived abroad for as long as you have, I can say hands down the most experience of wisdom, of life wisdom I have gained in my whole lifetime, comparing all the psychotherapy roles I've had, all the clinics, nonprofits, schools, private practice, living in the Midwest, living in the West Coast, living in Thailand. Hands down, the most wisdom I have gained is living abroad. Like, just being a human that lives and works in a foreign country that you were not raised in
Yes.
my opinion, forces our minds, right, to
Yes.
think outside the box. We no
Yes.
longer can think how we were raised.
Yes.
Yes, and I
Forces you
was
to be
just curious, like,
humble, and then
yeah,
and to keep learning. I mean, okay, so it's interesting. I grew up in the U.S. as children of immigrants, and then I remember when I was in the U.S. and sometimes someone new came over as an immigrant, and then I was thinking, oh, you don't speak very well or whatnot, and then it's kind of like, well, yeah, of course, everyone's got to start from somewhere, and then I have a huge appreciation for people who are willing to be adaptable. When I travel to different parts of the world, I meet so many people who speak multiple languages, and I can finally speak a few languages later in life. And I just find that it's about changing your thinking, allowing yourself to be adaptable, and then to not be scared. And so maybe when we first go abroad, and then for example in Thailand we drive on the opposite side of the road as we do in the U.S. And then that feels really weird at first. Like, how could that be? It's something different, but yet it exists. It works well. We're in another culture. And to be honest, I would say, from my experience, like, and maybe this goes into the treatment with psychedelic assisted therapy, is that being able to have an experience with that really dissolves your reality and maybe dissolves the ego framework, allows you to be
yes,
more open minded to know that there could be a number of different ways to organize, how we interpret the world in our mind. Because if we look at language, language is basically a processing filter for explaining our feelings and what we're observing to a way to communicate it to someone else. So that's like the black box definition of language. But when we learn another language, it actually influences how we think because the word choices change how we feel. So we might feel an emotion and we say, how do we describe that emotion? And that act of describing, this almost goes into therapy, can
that's
help you
right.
determine how you feel about it. And then so when I'm speaking Thai, because I can speak and read and write now, and I'm thinking about a feeling, I don't translate from English to Thai. I just go into it. I find I'm a different person than if I'm in English operating system, so to speak. And it's neither are good or bad. They're just different. But it gives you another way of looking at things. But I find I feel totally different. And so this how powerful that is. And then I started to realize, well, maybe that's why we can't remember stuff before we're something like 3 or 4 or something like that. It's really hard to have memories when we're 6 months old because I think it was really hard to process what were those feelings. So you could say language gives us the bricks for the building block of thoughts to be able to put that into a memory framework. So that's how powerful
Absolutely.
language is, super powerful. And even the words we choose for language, the words we choose to identify people with things, that's evolved over the years. So something that might have been when it first started was maybe innocuous at the time, but now in today's lens looks pejorative. So in other words, that's judgmental. So we need to think about the words we're using and change it. And so, it's about being open-minded to that. So, yeah, even
Absolutely.
it's amazing.
It's absolutely amazing. And that what you just described about the phenomenology of language, and when you're in Thailand and you're speaking Thai,
Yes,
it is quite remarkable how I don't know about you and your wife and your children, but because they've seen you in different countries, but I know people that have witnessed me in Thailand versus the United States, they hands down, everyone says, you act different. And
definitely.
I say, well, it's because the language and culture is different. So I can't explain it, but I just act different. And the language of Thai, there's so much focus on the heart, right? Everything is
Yes,
so heart-centered.
very
And so
much.
I
The whole
become
language
more
revolves around
heart-centered.
that. Exactly.
Yeah,
I mean, part of when we learn another language, I think part of it is we learn the words, but I almost have a stereotype of a typical person. So when I'm trying to speak Thai, I'm imagining a Thai guy, how they speak and what they do. So like same thing learning, I speak some Spanish. I would think about, okay, who's a stereotypical Spaniard and what are they saying and how fast do they speak? What's their cadence? What's the flow? And then effectively you're exposing your brain to all of that. And then now your brain just jumps to the pattern. So it's almost like you don't have to think like when you're speaking words, we're not thinking like, okay, how do we match tenses or what's the right word to use or what's the right verb or adjective? We just let it fly. It's
feel
like
it.
you learn that. So I think when you learn a language, you just expose your brain to all the different elements and then let it connect the patterns automatically. It's like when we learn an instrument, right? We kind of are like, this is a sound. I'm familiar with certain patterns or tunes, and then now it's like, let's just go for it, right? And then brain just does the work. So yeah, it's really fun. It's fun to keep exercising that into adulthood. Because I think if we don't do that, like the brain starts to ossify and get really, get stuck in certain tracks. And then probably the downside of that maybe is, like dementia and whatnot can be related to how much we're using your brain, but also it just keeps life fun. I think if we don't keep learning
Yes.
new stuff, well, number one, we're not going to be relevant because the world changes so fast. And then number two is if you're when you're living in the world, you might as well go for it because that's how we can be more useful to others. And I find it's more enjoyable to do it this way.
Oh, Sudi, you clearly have gone for it, and you clearly
Yeah.
continue to go for it. I
Yeah.
think until the moment you die, I can't imagine you not being that human that just keeps going for it. Just
Well, I mean, I think what it is I think part of what Buddhism teaches is, in our temple we've got four words written in Thai, and because I can read, I kind of when I show someone around, I'll explain it. So the first one says "gerd," it means to be birth, basically to be born. The second one is "gat," which means to be getting old or aging, and then the third one is "jeb," which is pain or suffering, and the last one is "thai," which is death. And if we look at Buddhism, and probably some of your listeners and viewers like that would be aware of it, it's this observation that every living being has to go through all four of these gates. And the idea is that not acknowledging it or trying to avoid it, not only do you not prevent that from still going through it, but actually your level of suffering increases simply because you're denying it. And when it happens, then you can't accept it like that instead of just taking an acceptance framework. So kind of with that, my view is that like I'm aware we're all going to have to go through those gates, myself included. And so while I've got, this consciousness and ability to do it, I'm going to make the most of it. I'm going to try to go for it as much as possible because it's precious. Our time, our consciousness, our ability to do what we can do is ephemeral. It's the nature of our design as a living being. And so, I think to not go for it would be a regret later. Now, maybe there's an element of overboard because obviously burnout is a thing, and then so
sure.
having one piece of cake might be okay, but the whole cake will make you sick. Again, the difference between medicine and poison is the
And poison.
dosage, right?
Yeah.
So that also goes to what we try to take on. But I think if we sort of find out what our energy balance is, what things give us more energy, what things take away from it, and then how does that match with what we can learn and our experience to help and add value to others. I think if we are aware of all of that, we can sort of just really really become very intentional with our life. And I'm attempting to do that in my own life and role model it for others, but it's mostly for me. Yeah.
It seems like you are beyond role modeling it for others, that you've been living it. And that's why I have deep respect for you, Sudi, is you really practice what you preach. And anyone who encounters you, whether it's at the cabin or your new facility in Crete or your family and your friends, they are so blessed to know you. I feel tremendously blessed to know you.
Vice versa. And I thank you for the kind words. I'm still a student. I'm quite humble. I want to try to keep up that mindset as long as I can, because I think that's a growth mindset, and I'm just enjoying it, And for me, what do they say? You are what you do. So,
Yes.
if you want to change who you are, then look at what you're doing and seeing what can you change. Or the other way I look at it is if you show me someone today, I can tell you what they were doing in the past. And if you show me what someone is doing today, I can tell you probably what their future might look like. Just because we're
Yes.
basically a collection of habits, right? I mean, and
Yes.
so I try to tell people like if you go all the way through, sometimes you get random thoughts. We choose to focus on a certain thought, and then that becomes a repeated thought that we then give word to. We put it in the frame of language, and then we share that word with someone else. And then the next chain of that was be to turn that into an action. And then repeated actions are a habit. And then basically a collection of habits is someone's character. And so if you look at that chain from just random thoughts to character, it's kind of scary. And it's like, okay, with our character, how many of those habits were put in if we think of our mind as a garden? And if we're looking at, was it a manicured
Mm,
garden? Were we planting every different type of species or basically flora in the garden, or was it put there by someone else, or did it just blow in by the wind? If we look at what we do in the garden, we take care of weeds. Where do weeds come from? They just blow in.
mm,
And so if we think about our character from thoughts, like what if we start to self-examine, like where are these things coming from? And some of that might be, childhood development. Sometimes it's intergenerational. Sometimes it's
hmm.
this is what therapy is a lot. But
Yeah, sure.
basically trying to focus on that and then look at like, okay, what are the and they're different mirrors, like having children. I've got young children, and I found out that after having children, sometimes you see patterns of behavior in the child, and then it's like you're like, well, stop doing that. And then you realize, oh, that's from me.
Yeah.
And there's nothing worse telling someone, well, don't do what I'm doing, do what I say, not what I do. That's nonsense, because it's like that's the easy way out. The right way is actually try to take that out yourself. Role model the right
Hmm.
behavior. That's hard.
Yes,
But I
it
mean
is.
it's not easy, but actually it's a great opportunity for growth. So there's so many different ways that life can be a teacher for us if we just choose to look. And then but of course that doesn't make it easy. If it's easy, we would all be, there's no problems, so yeah, it's a fun journey though. I really enjoy it. I hope
It's
to
a
bring
beautiful.
a version of the cabin to the US in the coming years, but I think that's
Oh, it's
that's kind
so
of part of
needed.
a larger scheme of things, but watch this space. That would be a goal of mine in the next few years.
I would happily help you with that goal. It is so needed in the United States of America, and we need multiple. We need like at least 4 different centers of the cabin
I
here,
think so.
you know?
I think so. But we start
Yeah.
with one because I mean the goal, even with Greece, I want to make sure that like, we have the same model that we know that works, that is working for clients there, that we feel that it's good for the staff feel well looked after, and that in terms of just their own making sure there's not
Well-being.
burnout from a
Mhm.
staff perspective, make sure it's good for clients, make sure that the process is working. So it requires some level of just watching it and then just making sure the quality is high before moving so fast. So I wouldn't have attempted to do something somewhere else before the cabin was established over this period of 4 years. So,
Wow,
and
Sudi,
then
you are
15 years
just
before that. So yeah,
incredible. Just your services and what you offer our world, so incredible. Really. That's not even a strong enough word. I'm so grateful for you. And I
thank
hope
you
that
so
you
much for your
really feel
kindness.
the impact that you are making in this world. And
It's
you, by the way, are increasing the offerings at your family of origin, since you said you're from a
yes,
long line of medicine, right?
yes, yes,
Like,
that's right. That's right.
right? Every generation, all we can do is be better than the previous generation,
Yeah, that's right.
and I
That's
would
right.
hope that your family recognizes this impact you're making globally with mental health and medicine.
Oh, thanks for that. I don't do it for that kudos. I think if I'm focused on being rewarded by what other people think, that's not enough to keep me going. Like it's almost like
Yeah,
with children, right? Like
yeah.
I think with children, they probably don't appreciate what a parent does until they have kids of their own, or until you're basically close to dead or dead already. Then they
Yeah,
appreciate it.
true.
So, but that by then, again, if the goal is you're waiting for your child to tell you, oh, thank you so much for what you did, and they're in their teenage years where you're basically at butting heads with them, trying to help them, that's not going to keep us going. We just do what we think is the right thing. And eventually it's like, we end up doing it for ourselves. And I think, at this stage in both of our careers, we know when we're doing good work. We've seen work that's good and that's not, and we've seen what we're able to do ourselves. So we just hold that to the standard of, are we doing good work? Can we do it better? Um, is this the best we're able to do? And then I think if we can do that, then we just keep focusing on the process and then the results come. Um, even with clients and whatnot, sometimes I don't realize the good work we do until like a random chance. I happen to be in London. I see someone who's got a 6-month chip or something, and then they give me a hug, and I go back and
Mm,
look, and I said, wow, I remember this one. This particular case was really hard. Everyone was worried that this isn't going to work, and the capacity of people to surprise both on the
yes.
upside and downside because you don't
Of
know. So I've learned to be
either
very
direction.
humble. Yeah, very
Yes,
humble and to realize like we just play a part in this and like it's part of something bigger and we're just doing our own piece of it. So it's this thing about caring a lot, but also being able to like detach from it too, to realize like we're not going to over control it.
that's right.
It's that weird, it's a bit of a paradox, but it is we have to think about both at the same time. Do the best you can while you can, but at the same time like don't get yourself over attached to the outcome because there are many other teachers in life besides ourselves, and that becomes too egoistic, right? So,
Absolutely,
yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Thank you for speaking
So,
to that. Absolutely.
yeah,
We can never work harder than our clients work on themselves. And I remember
that's right.
a
That's
really
right.
wise elder said that to me once too when I was over trying. And it's like, wow, that really stuck with me. You know, the client
Yeah.
themselves has to want to change and we can't work harder than them.
I mean,
So that's
what I look at is people that might struggle. Maybe they go to a treatment center and then it's not working for them and they might have to do it again. But I also look at people who've had good success. So I'll see people in recovery and they say, I had someone come in, he said he's been in recovery 37 years. He's in his 60s. And I was early in this role and I looked at him, I said, are you still counting? And he said, absolutely. He said, because I know if I go back to it, it's going to be the end of my life. And it was clear that was just part of his personality. And I said, wow. And I asked him, can you tell me about your journey? And he actually said he went to 4 or 5 different treatment centers. And I thought, like, what was different about the fifth than the first? And he
mhm.
said, well, a lot of it was me. A lot of it was I wasn't ready.
Yeah.
And then so then I started to reframe it around of like links in the chain versus just being the one solution because I think our medical advisory board was looking at it saying like, okay, how can you guarantee success with the first time? And I was like, well, I don't think you're taking the client into this.
Yeah.
And I said like this is more like a chronic type disease rather than a one and done. And I said, I
Nice.
think we have to change our framework. So maybe with that, it would be like looking at engagement versus just one-time success. It's not like someone comes in, takes a pill, and then they're gone. Everything is fine. It's more like, well, how are they engaging with the provider framework or other structures so that they're able to find out that combination of themselves and others? And even if we look at like the whole model of like AA, NA, a lot of it has to do with that. Again, it goes back to the teaching framework for medicine. See one, do one, teach one. So that service and sponsorship of others helps kind of
Mhm.
pound in our own discipline because it's like, okay, when we're helping someone else who's early stage and they're struggling, and then a lot of times that forces self-reflection to say, wait a minute, I haven't done this right. As I'm explaining this, I'm not doing this. And I think that that continual balance really helps. It also gives a mission for people. So it's I mean, one of the things I've studied a lot is psychology and how the mind works, how people think, things around why are people persuasion or negotiation.
Mm.
And I was talking to my team, and our team is very good at that. And then I told them, I said, hey, the difference between this skill set, it's actually the same skill set as running a boiler room, right? It's basically like that's the same skill set of basically, scamming people. So I said, we also need around, integrity and keeping ourselves honest to make sure we're doing this the right way. And one member of
Nice.
the team started to say that, that's some Star Wars stuff. I said, like, well, it's not meant to be, but I hear what you're saying, right? So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of analogies there. So it's really fun. It's really fun because I think as we help other people, we learn tools that help ourselves. And I would say sometimes folks tell me who don't understand the field and they say, how can you work with people who are having mental health issues or addicts? And, doesn't that seem very
Mm.
stressful? They seem really tough. And I said, no, you don't understand. That's the world. It's just a question of
Yes.
degree. Everyone has
Yes.
this. It's just that the
Yes.
people that we're helping, it's so extreme and so painful that they need really professional solutions where they're really going out of their way to take time and resources and make investments on themselves. But I said, all of us have that. And so I think just working in the field, it gives us more knowledge to try to help ourselves and loved ones too. So it's a very good use of our time. It's one of these fields where you can work all day, but it feels like you're still in a flow state. You still feel fresh because
Absolutely.
it's good work to do. I mean, I've worked in other roles where it was something very intangible. I was making some product in a hard disk drive, component or something. And yeah, it was important. People were using it, but it wasn't that connection to it. So at the end, it just felt like, okay, we're just doing something to make the owners more money and produce more units like that. It's like, well, it's not the worst, but you're getting a paycheck, but it wasn't the same level of meaning and fulfillment as this work I've had. So I go back to what I said earlier, where this has been the most rewarding work I've done in a 30-year career. And
I
really
can
lucky
feel
to
that.
be part of it. Yeah. I mean,
Oh,
it's also why, you're a therapist, I suppose, too. Every therapist I talk to,
absolutely.
if you love what you're doing, it's, you just, it's not about the money. It's about basically the process and the fulfillment. Of course, money is important too. Not having enough is a problem. But at the same time, there's more to life than that. If we only focus on that one dimension, you're missing the point.
Exactly. Absolutely. Well said. Sudi, I could talk to you forever, and you have so much knowledge and so much wisdom. And I want to honor your time and the
Sure.
viewers. And I just want to ask, is there anything more in our last minute together that you would just like to offer? You've already given us so many nuggets of wisdom, but anything you'd like to add in our last minute to the viewers?
Well, I mean, if anyone is looking for help, if someone wants an experience where it's outside, in the U.S., in terms of a treatment center approach, it's very holistic. Please reach out to us. You can find us at if you look at the cabin Chiang Mai or the cabin rehab online, you can find us. We're more than happy to try to help you or at least guide you to the resources you need to get well. I think it's important when people are struggling, either if someone sees a loved one or a friend struggling or themselves is struggling, to basically seek services of professionals, because I believe in the field. Uh, the majority of folks are doing it for the right reasons. They're trying to help others. They've gone through a lot of work to be trained and learn abilities in terms of models that work, as well as experience with individuals and clients and patients. So I think seeking professional help is always a good thing. I think it also helps people add to their knowledge base. So I'd encourage people to reach out if they need help. And it's been a pleasure to talk with you. I hope we have a long relationship going forward, Karen. And thanks for inviting me to your podcast. It's very special to be part of your series.
Beautiful, Sudi. Of course, we have a long relationship in the future ahead of us. And I want all of the viewers to know that the cabin website will be in the show notes. So you can just look at the show notes to see the reference to the cabin. And then we can update it when the Crete facility is up and running. We can add that to the
Yes,
show
that
notes as
that one
well.
that one we call the Edge. So it's the Edge
The Ed
Rehab.
the
That's
edge rehab, because that's also so needed. So all of that you'll be able to get in the show notes. And Sudi, thank you so much for everything that you do and for believing and doing it, because it helps
yeah. Thank
you
you.
feel good just about who you are in the world, being a benevolent being, and how you are embracing that bodhisattva ideal just to
Yes,
keep
yes,
spreading benevolence in the world
yes.
for healing. So thank you
Yes,
for that.
thank you very much. I wish you a great weekend and happy holidays, great end of year, and all the best in 2026.
Thank you. And with that, thank you everyone for listening to Trauma, Psychedelics, and Buddhism.
Thank you for listening to Trauma, Psychedelics, and Buddhism with Karen Sprinkle. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. To learn more or to grab your copy of The Thriving Self, visit KarenSprinkle.com. Karen and this podcast do not endorse or encourage the illegal use of psychedelics.